And today we've got Tom making noises. We've got Mark sitting.
Not making noises.
and we've got Jared here. First time.
Also sitting.
First time Jared on the show. How you feeling?
I'm feeling amazing. I have loved getting the opportunity to listen to the podcast in my own time, and it's just such a thrill to be here. Really happy.
I'm going to call you First Time Jared from now on.
First time Jared.
First time Jared.
Everybody needs a first time Jared.
Let's not. Okay, Tom, can you start us off with our first community question?
I sure can. All right, interesting question from the community. I have finally started making the thing I've always wanted to make, but it's turning out to be far less amazing than it seemed in my head. How do you push through a discouraging start?
First of all, I think everything seems amazing when it's in your head until you start to try to do something. I heard you say a long time ago, Tom, that your best ideas will always just kind of be in your head because as soon as you try to bring them into reality, it's hard. It's just hard.
That's the shower principle. It's like every single time I take a shower, I have a million fully formed, perfect ideas. And the second I step out of the shower, they're gone. I need to get like a waterproof tablet in the shower or something.
I could just be there to dictate for you.
just sit on the toilet and I just...
First time Jared in the corner.
Are you there? First time Jared?
Yeah, here to write down your first time ideas. I got you. Yes.
So what do you do? I mean, have you all experienced something similar? You have these ideas in your head and they seem amazing, but then when you actually start to work through them and feel the challenges, they seem less amazing overall?
I think anyone, who's ever made anything ever has experienced exactly this. Like the start is almost always discouraging.
Yeah, you have such a desire to make it good and to make it great that it can be paralyzing to get into the mundane parts of it or to have a little bit of fear of moving forward because of what you want it to be. And I have found that sometimes you just have to do it. In fact, I'm talking to Tom a little bit about doing a writing project that I've been working on because it's taken me a little bit out of my comfort zone for the types of design I usually do. And Tom's like, just write, man. Just write. Just get into the habit of writing. Just keep going. Don't worry about how good it is. Do a volume, and then something's going to stick at some point. And I've found that discipline, I think, a lot of times will dislodge when you're stuck. It'll help get you dislodged.
Yeah, in writing, and I think this applies to all creative enterprise, the phrase writing is revision has been very helpful to me. Like the idea that the craft of writing isn't sitting down and immediately putting something to paper that's perfect. Writing involves revision. Like the act of revising is writing. And I think it was Joyce Carol Oates, who's a writer, on her masterclass. She talks a lot about how her first draft of anything is literally just her collecting ideas of what she's going to eventually write about. And she holds the first draft to absolutely no standard whatsoever. Like no one else ever gets to see it. It gets to be absolute garbage. And she just spills out and runs, knowing that from there she gets to refine and make the thing that she wants to make and that she's capable of making. But it never comes out the first time you sit down.
Mm-hmm. And I think that what both of you are saying, in a way, is to, instead of preparing for, what happens and what do I do if when I start working on this, it doesn't end up looking like I want, to know that a part of any creative process is seeing how this idea can be realized and seeing the strengths and the weaknesses of it and how you're going to actually bring it forth.
Because it will always look not as good as what you imagined, right? I mean, like every time you ever start a project, I think it will always look not as good as you imagined in your head, because it's easy to imagine in your head wonderfulness and without any obstacles.
And infinite skill. There's something to be said about finishing a project where you are currently at and letting it be, a part of your progress, an achievement, a milestone that you have achieved, and that even though the end product wasn't exactly what you imagined in your head when you first came up with the idea, it was as good as you could make now. And in the future, when you can make something as good as you thought of originally, you can look back and see the progression and how you came.
Yeah, I think it's an unrealistic expectation to think that anything is going to look amazing until it's done, for one. And if you do enough of these types of projects, what you find is it's going to look different in the end than what you imagined anyway. So it's going to be a different picture. It might be more amazing than you ever imagined. And beyond that, I think other people might find it amazing, even if you don't. So you owe it to yourself to just do the work. Do the work when you don't feel like it. Do the work when it doesn't feel amazing, because that's why they call it work. This isn't a hobby. This is something you signed up to do, as a commitment. And you just have to push through.
And even if you're not getting paid for it,
is through.
commit to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the original prompt is, I have finally started making the thing I've always wanted to make. How do you push through a discouraging start? And I think it's important to realize, like, when you sit down and you start working on something, whatever's coming out or however you're feeling is not indicative of what it's going to be at the end, what you're capable of, whether you should be doing this at all, whether this was all a grand mistake. Like, I think the difference between what the person who wrote this question and someone who is a professional at whatever the thing they're making is, the difference is the professional has learned that what you're feeling is a very standard part of the process to be expected, and they're just really comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And you haven't experienced it enough to be comfortable with the fact that it sucks at first.
Mm-hmm.
But that is just part of the process, and it doesn't mean you're on some wrong path necessarily.
I would also remind people, aka Lacey, when you listen to this later, remind yourself that what you feel and see when you're inside of a project is very different than what other people feel and see when they see a project from the outside, right? You cannot see the detail of the greatness. You cannot see the impact that something's going to have when you're inside it all day long. When you're doing the work inside.
What does it look like when you're inside something? So it looks like spider hands.
A scuttling spider. Yeah, that's what it feels like when you're inside working on it. But from the outside, it's always that way, right? People come to your home and they're like, "Oh, you have such a beautiful home," Well, you're inside it all the time. You don't even notice what it is because you're inside it all the time. I think the same is to be said for the work that we do on the projects we try to create too.
Yeah, in the early part of a project, sometimes you're expecting a certain acceleration or a momentum as well that just does not exist because you haven't hit stride yet, and you have to continue being diligent and pummel that thing and try different things and iterate until you hit something that works. And the only way to do that is with volume, is to just keep trying things, especially in the creative field. Like, your job is to be creative and to come from a different angle. And the one that you've been, playing out in your head, maybe that doesn't work. So what do? Stop or feel stuck? Okay. Well, the only way out of that is to just open more doors, right? Until you find a way out.
How many doors are there?
17.
You already know the answer to that.
17.
As many as you can imagine.
I thought it was 15, but okay.
I do what Lacey tells me.
All right, let's move on to the next.
Lacey has found 2 more doors than you. Mike.
Let's do it.
Still on.
Bop, bop, bop.